All right, I want you to notice what it says in the well-known verse 22 of Jude. It says, "And if some have compassion, making a difference, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh." And this passage that we just read is one that's often used to motivate others to tell people about Jesus. It's kind of a rallying cry for soul winners to just get active and go out there, make a difference in somebody's life, tell them about Jesus, tell them about salvation, tell them how it's a free gift. And this is kind of a rallying cry, and we do. If we're going to, sometimes we need to find motivators. It's not always easy to just do what we know what we're supposed to do. We all know what we're supposed to do. We all know we're supposed to go to church. We know we're supposed to obey the Bible. We know we're supposed to go soul winning. But let's just be honest, sometimes we don't feel like it. Has anybody admit they're not so spiritual that there are times they don't feel like going soul winning? Okay? There's plenty of times I don't feel like it. Right? And so when that happens, sometimes you need something to motivate yourself. And compassion is a great motivator. Compassion, seeing that need, thinking about the idea of these people out there dying and going to hell someday, that is a motivator. And you do. Hopefully you see people and you look at them and you have compassion thinking about that. And if that's what it takes to get you motivated, then great. But sadly, and often, people are just not compassionate. I think that's a big part of the reason. We don't have a lot of compassion for people. And I think a lot of that is because of our culture. I mean, because obviously if I ask you, hey, do you want people to go to hell? No, that's a terrible thought. In fact, that's such a terrible thought, I don't like to think about it. Therefore, I never think about it, right? And isn't that kind of how we are? It is very easy for us today in America to distract ourselves from things that we probably should be thinking about. There are many unpleasant things that are going on in the world. For example, we know that there's a lot of murder going on out there. There's a lot of child abuse that has taken place. There are battered women out there that have abusive husbands, and none of us like the thought of that. And so you know what we do? We don't think about it. We don't think about it, but the problem is if we don't think about these things, we're not going to have any compassion. We're not going to be motivated to do anything about it. And we do. Well, have you ever watched a documentary or a program and that highlights real problems in our world and even in our own country? You want to get yourself depressed? Just go watch a program and stuff about human trafficking that goes on in this country. And you know what will happen? You will become very uncomfortable. You are not going to feel good. It's going to bother you, as it should. As it absolutely should. And so it's a lot easier for us to just not think about negative things. And I'm not here today to just motivate everyone to just start thinking about negative things. Okay? That's not what I'm here to do. But I do want to talk about how to have compassion, because as believers, we have been commissioned to preach the gospel to every creature. We are supposed to be winning souls. We are supposed to be not just winning souls too, but we're also supposed to be teaching people to observe all things. We're supposed to help people live like a Christian so they can have a better life. Because even if you're saved, if you continue to live like the world, you're going to have a miserable existence. And we ought to have compassion on people. It's like, you know what, we need to teach them a better way. We need to show them that that marriage doesn't have to be like it is for the vast majority of people. That, yes, statistically, kids aren't doing very good these days, but it doesn't have to be that way for us. We can show them a better way, but we've got to have compassion. And I want to show you some things in the scriptures too that I just think are interesting where we see compassion brought up. Because I think when we look at what the Bible often specifies, to me when I was reading this, it reminded me about our culture. That we do. There are some things about our culture that I think is very different today than it was before. So for example, think about all the people that we cross paths with and interact on a regular basis, yet we know nothing about them. I mean, think about just gas station workers. Okay, there's gas station workers. I recognize them. They recognize me. We see each other. We do a little small talk when we go there, but I don't even know their name. They don't know my name. And we don't know anything about each other. And think about neighbors. Okay, I mean, how many of you, like, you know the names of the people who live on both sides of you? Okay. A lot of you don't. Some of you do. Okay, now we do with us, because it's Jason, but even before that, we didn't, and the one next. But it was years before we figured it out. It was years. The lady who lives 2 houses down from us, we know her now, but we've lived there for 13 years. And I forgot how many years it was before we figured it out. The house after her, no clue. Don't know what they could walk in the church right now, sit in the front row, and I wouldn't know them. That's kind of how we are today. We don't interact with those that are around us very much. And so the thing is, when it comes to the people in our community, in our local area, how are we going to have compassion for these people when we don't even know who they are? We don't know anything about them. We don't know the struggles that they're going through. We don't know, and listen, people are dealing with things. Those people that you're interacting with, those people you're crossing paths with, and even the people that we talk to when we're out soul winning, did you know they all have a story? They've all got struggles. They've all got battles. There's people that are dealing with cancer. They're dealing with other sicknesses. Some people are dealing with chronic pain. You've got people that are going through marriage problems. They have problems. They're having problems with their children. I mean, you have no idea. Maybe they're dealing with certain stress on their job. Maybe they just lost their job. They got laid off. They're getting run through the ringer of life. And we don't even know anything about that. Some of those people that you get aggravated with when you're out driving because they didn't take off right away when the light turned green like you're supposed to, that you want to honk at and you're going to ruin their day, and, things like, shake your fist at them and stuff like that. You have no idea. That person might be somebody really struggling with something. We have no idea. We don't know the people that we are surrounded by, but it didn't used to be that way. My dad often would complain when his dad had one of those old cameras that didn't have any sound to it, or his family had one of those growing up, and there's all these videos, home videos that his dad took, and my dad always complained because he was barely in it, and there was like more video of the neighbors than there was him. And back then too, everybody knew their neighbors. When my grandma would be over and we'd be watching those things, she's like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so, that's so. It's all these neighbors. They knew them. They knew everything about them. They were friends with, they helped each other. But today we don't do that. In fact, and this is how it is across the board, but whenever we have some kind of personal need, who do we typically call? Either family or church family. Hey, and that's great. I'm glad we've got those things. I'm glad we've got church family. But people used to call people right in their own neighborhood. People who lived on the same street as them. They had that kind of closeness, but we don't even know these people. And that's just kind of how we are culturally. We have social media today where we know a bunch of people that we'll probably never see. And those people are being fake because we only know what they post on social media. And that's often the people that we focus a lot of our time and attention to. And if that's the case, if that's kind of how we are, and let's just admit it, we are like that as well. Even though we're Christians, we are a part of the American culture. Therefore, we do not know our community. We do not know the people around us. We don't know what they're going through, what they're dealing with in their life. And therefore, it's going to be difficult for us to have compassion. It's not just going to come naturally, not in the way that we operate today, not in the way we live. But the reality is, if we did have compassion as people, I wouldn't even have to motivate you to go soul winning. I wouldn't be able to stop you from telling people about Jesus if you had compassion. I like to think about, there's people I know, there was a guy I went to church with years ago who got saved. And when he got saved and he realized, man, I just escaped hell, all of a sudden he got very concerned about his family. And for months, he was bringing people to the church from his family and they were getting saved. For months, he was winning people in his family to Christ and had many of them come through the church because he had compassion for his family. And that's pretty easy to have that, to have compassion for your family. But we need to have compassion for those that are surrounding us too. And so we're going to look at several passages that mention compassion. And I want to highlight something that's often associated with compassion in the Bible that will hopefully help us understand what we need to work on to be more compassionate. Because I think that I really just got a couple things I would like for everybody to just try to implement in their life. Try to make this a part of who you are, because if you do, it will help you be more effective, I believe, in these areas. But culturally speaking, we are not this way. And so first off, we're going to go through several passages, but Exodus chapter 2 in verse 6, notice this is when the story of Moses, when Pharaoh's daughter finds him. It says, and when she had opened it, talking about the ark that he was in, notice it says, she saw the child, and behold, okay, look, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him, and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Notice, when she saw the baby, and she saw him crying, she had compassion. She's like, I want to take this baby in. Now, folks, there's something powerful about seeing a baby and hearing its cry. We've all heard the stories about abandoned babies, and we've heard some of just the horrible, tragic stories that are out there, and we hear those stories and they bother us, and we quit thinking about them because we don't want to think about that kind of thing. But let me tell you something. If we were ever in the presence of it and saw something like that, I think we'd all do something. If you found that baby abandoned somewhere and you heard it crying, I don't think there's too many of us in here that would be able to just walk away from that, because it would do something to us. Why? Because when you see it, notice it says she saw the babe, and behold, it wept. She heard that crying, and it changed everything. It changed her attitude. And so we'll hear about things and we don't really like it, but there's something that happens when we see and when we hear. That's when the compassion comes in. It does that to us. We see in Matthew 9:36, talking about Jesus, but when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered as sheep having no shepherd. It was kind of foolish the way these people were just following after Christ, going into this desert place, because they don't have food. It's a long journey. This was a foolish thing. But Jesus, when he saw them doing this, he didn't just get mad at them. He saw these people that were desperate. He saw a people that desperately wanted something from him. And even though what they were doing was foolish, he didn't get mad. No, he had compassion, and he met their need. It's kind of like when I picture him looking at all these people just following around. It reminds me of the chickens at our house. I don't do hardly anything with the chickens. But it aggravates me greatly when I go outside and all the chickens start following me around. And they do that, you know why? Because it's usually when they're hungry. And they think I'm going to feed them. And it just aggravates me, because I will tell them violently, I don't have any food. And I will yell at them. I'll tell them, I will eat you. And they still follow me. I'll turn around, I'll yell at them, I'll threaten to kill them and eat them. They scatter a little bit, and then I walk, and then they follow me again. And sometimes, when I see them doing that, the more desperate they are, even though they're chickens that I eat regularly, not those ones, but other chickens, you know, all of a sudden it's like, they must really be hungry. And then it's like, you know what? And then I'll tell one of the kids to get them some food, or if I've been home by myself, I'll go get them some food. Because I feel sorry for them. They are desperately following this maniac, threatening to kill them, because they're hungry. And they're dumb. You know, they don't realize I'm threatening to kill and eat them. One of these days I'm going to. Because one of the roosters attacked Abby this week while we were gone. So we're thinking about having a judgment and a trial, and sentence is it will become fried chicken and it'll become a meal. But we haven't done that yet. It won't understand that, but it'll make me feel better. But anyway, Jesus, though, he saw these multitudes, these people just kind of foolishly, going out of the way when they don't have any food or anything. But he would see them, and he recognized, even though this was, not wise, all these multitudes traveling into these places like they were, he saw that, and he had compassion, and he would help them. He would do something for them. But it was when he would see them, it says he saw the multitude and was moved with compassion. What he saw affected him. It didn't anger him. It moved him to help. Mark 14:14, and Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. As he's looking at people who are sick, it moved him. It caused him to have compassion as he's seeing people desperately trying to get their loved ones to him. When he sees that desperation, their hurt him. And it did. He was fine until he saw that, and then it moved him to compassion when he saw the men the 4 men who carried their friend to a roof, cut a hole in the roof so they could get him down to Jesus. When Jesus saw that, when you see people that are in a desperate state, it ought to move you to compassion where, even though everything's fine with you, everything's not fine with them, and therefore it bothers you, it hurts you, it grieves you, and then it'll cause you to actually do something. And we see that would happen with Jesus. But it was when he would see it. He probably saw people crying. He probably saw tears in people's eyes. He's like, I need to get to them. I need to do something. Matthew 18:26, the servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. This is that parable of that unjust steward or unrighteous servant that did not pay his debt. But notice it says, then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion and loosed him and forgave him the debt. So when the man is apologizing, when the man is begging him to forgive him, it moved him. It moved him to compassion. We see in Luke 7:13, and when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said unto her, weep not. Okay, now listen, this woman's son was dead. Why is Jesus telling her not to weep? You know why? Part of it did not make Jesus feel good seeing this woman weep. Jesus seeing this woman weep, you know what bothers all of us when we see people weeping? You know why? Because it moves us to compassion. It's like they're sad, that upsets us. Okay? And that's okay. That's good. We don't like seeing people sad. Okay? And it doesn't mean the fact that we don't like it, we're not saying, how dare you affect my mood by you having a negative mood. No, it's just we understand, we want good for other people. And so especially if it's somebody that you love. Okay? When the news media is crying because they don't like how the election went, I'm not moved with compassion in that. I'm moved to joy and jubilance when that kind of thing happens. When Selena Gomez had her meltdown the other day on social media, I was not moved to compassion. I was moved to great joy. That's probably a bad attitude. But at the same time, when it's somebody that you love and you see them crying, you don't like seeing that. And so what did Jesus do? He said, weep not. But he didn't just tell her, hey, suppress that emotion so I don't have to feel uncomfortable. He didn't do that, which is what a lot of us want people to do. Suppress your emotions so you don't make me uncomfortable. Right? So I'm not moved to feeling in a way I don't want to feel. No, but it says, and he came and he touched the bier, and they that bear him stood still. And he said, young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. He's like, he sees that woman grieving. And listen, I've been there before when I've been talking with people who are grieving over great loss. And let me tell you, it doesn't make me feel good. And I've wished I could do something like this. I've wished I could perform some kind of miracle, and I can't do it. But just being there, seeing, hearing the tears, that affects you. It moves you to compassion. And Jesus, thankfully, thank God, he has the ability to do whatever he wants to do. And when Jesus sees this woman grieving like that, you know what he did? He put a stop to it. Why? Because he saw her and he was moved with compassion. And again, it is totally normal and natural for a mother to suffer greatly at the loss of a child. And Jesus didn't say something like, well, hey, that's life. That's how it goes, living on a sin-cursed world. Sometimes the children die before the parents. No, Jesus hurt because she was hurting. He saw it, but he was fine until he saw it. When he saw it, that changed everything. Luke 10:33, but a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. You all know the story of the Good Samaritan. You've got this man that's beat up half to death, and he's laying there, suffering as a result of the beating that he took. And while there were a couple other people that saw it, what did they do? They tried to look away from it. You know why? Because there was, again, you can't help but see somebody that's suffering, and there's going to be something inside you that's going to say, you need to do something about that. So what do these guys do? They try to ignore it. They tried, and that's often what we try to do with a lot of the realities of the world that we're living in. We just try to ignore it. We try to look away. But no, this Samaritan, when he saw him, he had compassion. He didn't just look away. No, he looked at him, and then he did what needed to be done to take care of this man that was in his need. What he saw affected him and moved him to action. Luke 15:20. This is the story of the prodigal son. And it said, and he arose and came to his father, but when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And I love to think about this image here because without a doubt, this father felt many emotions knowing that his son had left him and was living a wicked lifestyle. I'm sure there was anger. I'm sure there was sadness. I'm sure he felt a lot of different things. But you know what? When he saw his son coming back after he had spent all, after being in a hog pen, when the father saw him a great way off, he probably noticed, that's my son. He's probably lost weight. He's thinner. He's dirty. He's wearing dirty clothes. And when he saw his son in this terrible state, he didn't get this, attitude of that's what he gets for going against his dad. That's not what he did. No, he saw that and he had compassion. And he ran, and what does he do? He puts a rope, he's covering him up. Hey, he sees that his son probably looks hungry. Go kill the fatted calf. Let's go feed him. Let's go take care of him. But notice that seeing him caused that compassion to come. So we constantly see that. Them seeing things, it affecting them, it moving them to, and it causing them to have action. Notice too, Jesus' response to seeing Jerusalem. Today happens to be Palm Sunday, and in the famous story where Jesus comes to Jerusalem, this is something that happened on that day, but it says in Luke 19:41, it says, when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it. Notice that Jesus, when he showed up at the day of visitation, at the time appointed, at the time prophesied of, at the time that Israel they were supposed to be ready. God had given them instructions after they had been brought back into the land from the Babylonian captivity, after God performed this miracle of restoring them to the land, and after God allowed them to build another temple after the one had been destroyed, and after God had given them all these instructions, even though they had messed up so many things, even though they had broken God's covenant, God gave them instructions of things they were supposed to do, waiting, preparing for the Messiah to come into that temple. And when Jesus came and he looked over the city that day, not only was Israel not even close to being ready, they were a mess. And Jesus saw it, and it brought him to tears. He wept over it, saying, if thou hadst known, even at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the days shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. When Jesus looked at that city, as he's looking over and he sees that temple, Jesus knew in that day, judgment's coming for these people. This city is going to be destroyed. While Jesus, of course, is going to come bringing salvation through his death on the cross, a spiritual salvation, a soul salvation that is necessary for the whole world, a physical salvation was not in the cards for Jerusalem on that day. They were not going to be saved. They were going to be destroyed. And sure enough, just as Jesus said, they were destroyed. Why? Because they didn't know the time of his visitation. Jesus did not want them to be physically destroyed. Jesus loved those people. Jesus loved that city. The disciples didn't want to see that, but that was what was going to happen. And when Jesus saw the state, it moved him and he wept. And so what we're seeing in all these passages, Lamentations 3:51 says, mine eye affecteth mine heart because of the daughters of my city. The reason we don't have compassion like we should often is because we're just not seeing anything. We're not looking. We're not aware of who's around us, of what's around us, of what people are dealing with, and therefore the compassion is not going to be there. I can get up here and I could read a bunch of scriptures saying, have compassion, have compassion, have compassion, but we all need some inspiration. We all need more than just what the scripture says. Because again, having compassion it's a very emotional thing. And I can't just get up here today and just go, all right, now I'm compassionate. I can't just go up to the altar and make a decision. I'm now compassionate. Okay? No, if I'm not, something's got to change in me. Something's got to affect me. And we see in the Bible, it's what we see that causes us to have compassion. When we see things, when we hear things, as we observe, it will cause that compassion to come. What we see affects our minds and our hearts, and it produces things like compassion if we are normal people and not some kind of psychopath. Okay, if you're the kind of person that can see somebody suffering and that doesn't move you, something's wrong with you. There's weirdos out there that enjoy seeing people in pain. What do we call those? We call those people psychopaths. Nothing moves them. Nothing affects them. Okay, we're not talking about psychopaths today. Hopefully I'm not preaching to a church of psychopaths. Hopefully I'm preaching to a church of normal people. And if you're normal people, just understand, if you start seeing what's out there, I'm not telling you to try to see something that's not there. No, these are things that are out there, but we just naturally look away. We naturally don't pay attention to these things because they make us uncomfortable. But we need that because that's where that compassion is going to come from, and it's going to motivate us to actually do something and make a difference. And so what I want to call everyone on to do in this message is to just be an observant people and start paying attention and actually look at what's going on in our world, and especially in our own community. Pay attention to what's going on in our families and in our church, because we can get so sucked into our own little worlds today that even though we are physically surrounded by many people, we miss many opportunities to make a difference through compassion and also just to appreciate what many people are doing. Okay, because look how many people today, when they're walking through the store or the mall, and there's people everywhere, how many people are walking and looking at their phones at the same time? I mean, just completely oblivious to everything that's going on around them. And if we fail to pay attention to these things, not only are we going to miss out on opportunities to make a difference, but I think we're going to have a very negative outlook on life too. And it's amazing how many blessed Christians who are healthy, who are saved, who have wives and children and houses and plenty to eat. It's amazing how many people like that are still very negative people. They have a very negative outlook on life. And I think part of the problem is they're not looking they can't see past the nose on their face, as they often say. They have no ability to see what's going on around them. I think about the trip that we just took to Kentucky this week. Things that I saw in Louisville affected me. As we are, soul winning in a very poverty-stricken area. When I saw the poverty, because we hear about crime in these cities, and when we hear about crime in these cities, we just think, why don't they just wall the place off and just leave them to themselves? Who's ever thought that before? Okay, who's ever said that before? Okay, I think that often, right? Now, and while it's easy for us to say that, like all the violence, why doesn't God just rain down fire and brimstone like He did on Sodom and Gomorrah? Why doesn't God do this to these places? When you hear the numbers, when you hear about the crime, when you hear about just all the fornication and the drugs and all these things, you hear all that, we think very negatively about that. But when you go there and when you see the poverty, when you see the way these people have to live, when it's like one guy I was talking to who got saved, who was just telling me to pray for him because, he's having a very difficult time staying out of trouble. You know why? Because he's surrounded by trouble all the time, and he's on a very strict probation because he's messed up in the past. He acknowledged that he's messed up. I forgot what it was that he did, but he was on very strict probation, and because of that, he has a very difficult time getting a job. And most of us, if we have no job, we're going to get in trouble. Listen, especially single, healthy men with no jobs have a very difficult time staying out of trouble. Men need to be busy. But what do? They got these people all living in these apartments in these slummy areas. They can't get a job or anything. And then we're all surprised when they need money, they get involved with gangs and drugs and things like that. And they get in trouble again. When you realize the challenges these people face, when you talk to some of the children, when you go into some of the houses and you see the way they live, it kind of changes your perspective on things. It causes you to have compassion. And it's like, I can't solve these people's financial problems. I can't solve their cultural problems. I can't solve a lot of these problems for them right now. But you know what I can do? I can tell them how they can go to heaven. I can tell them about a good church that's in the area that will love them and that will help them. Understanding too, culturally, it's going to be very difficult for them because there's so many joke churches out there. And when you have a real church that's doing things right, it's going to be very foreign to these people. It's going to be very different. It's going to be very difficult. And you can provide a little hope, but there's something when you see the poverty, when you see the crime, when you see the drugs, you see when you're just smelling pot everywhere you go. And I got sick of the smell of pot. Even when we were driving around, I felt like we could just smell it all the time. And just folks, you have people out there, is it unbiblical to drink or to smoke pot? Okay, obviously there's no verse about smoking pot in the Bible, but it's like, hey, have you ever went and looked at the cultures consumed with that? It's not good. Everything associated with it is very negative. It is not helping these people at all. But at the same time, that's what they get for smoking pot. Well, again, here's the other thing too. A lot of people are dealing with great deals of stress. A lot of people have pain. They've got physical problems. And they just don't know any better. That's a culture. That's the way people do things. Nobody's shown them a better way. Nobody's taught them a better way. And and as we go and we see people like that who are just in the midst of a mess, did you know it's okay for you, rather than thump your chest and pray imprecatory prayers, to have compassion and just pray that maybe you can help get them saved. Maybe you can help get them in a good church, get them on the right path. But you're not going to if you don't see these things. I don't know, it's changed me before. I remember somebody years ago in the detention home that I was disgusted with and I was aggravated with because he was a pretty rotten kid, definitely deserved to be in jail. And I remember several weeks after seeing him there and being very aggravated and just kind of disgusted by him, I remember we were in town, we went to a garage sale and he was there with his parents. And as soon as I saw his parents, and you know what completely changed my perspective? I had a completely different attitude about that kid because when I saw what he was being raised in, I was like, that kid doesn't have a chance. That's what he's got to live with. And it changed my perspective. I see that often. There's young people who have made terrible choices, who are doing terrible things that I don't agree with, things that are sinful, but then you find out how they were raised. You find out what they grew up around, and it's like, I don't know if I'd have done any better if I was raised in that home. I probably would have acted the same way. I probably would have had the same response. The reality is, most of us, not everybody in here, thank God for grace and thank God for some of you that were saved out of certain things and you've taken a different path, but most of us are a product of what we were raised in. That's what I am. There's definitely nothing exceptional here. I'm just living the way I was raised. And that's the reality for most people out there. They are a product of their environment and what they were raised in. And thank God for the exceptions. Thank God it doesn't have to be that way if you came from something bad. But that is the case many times. And so, if we would actually be aware of these things, if you would actually go into these homes, and I could tell you story after story about just bus kids that we've had in the past that I've worked with, kids in detention home, and just how everything changed when I went to their house, I visited their home, I saw the way they lived. I saw what they dealt with. It changed everything because of what I saw. And I'm telling you, we just don't see enough things. There's something that changes your attitude towards certain communities when you see the way they live. Those small things. There's something about just sometimes even just going and smelling the place. It does. Those things affect you. And when you experience that, everything's different. And there's things that's hard to put in words. You have to experience it for yourself. You have to see it. So have you ever been acquainted with somebody like a coworker, and then you met their family, and then all of a sudden you felt like you understood them better after that? Have you ever met that guy that just I've worked with people before, just had terrible attitudes. They seem miserable, and then you run into them one day out at Walmart or something. They're with their wife. and you see her, the way she's acting and the way she's treating him, and it's like, I now see why that guy has a bad attitude. If I was living with that, I would be just like him. I remember one guy working one of the worst attitudes you could ever imagine. He was on his 4th/3rd wife. He'd been married 4 times, but the one he was currently married to, he had been married to in the past and married her again. And he was miserable with her. And she was a major piece of work. And I remember seeing them one time. And I saw her, I'm like, I get it now. I get it. I don't think as negatively about you as I did before, because I now understand why you have such a terrible attitude. I would too, if I was married with somebody like that. Dude, have you ever met that person that just seemed like they hated everybody? Or a lot of people too, who seem like they hate women. Usually it's because they either had like a horrible mom or a horrible wife, or both. And a lot of preachers out there that just seem like they hate women. Usually too, you find out their marriage is not very good. And it's like, yeah, I'd have the same attitude if I was married to that. But so it's just, there's something about seeing these things. It affects everything. And I believe one of the reasons we're losing our effectiveness, we just don't know enough about the people we're supposed to be reaching, because we're not seeing anything. We are a part of this culture where we're just in our own little worlds. We're in our own little bubble, going around everywhere, on our phones, and just not talking to people, not interacting with people. And so if I can just leave you with just a quick admonishment to just do a couple things, I think it will help you be more effective and compassionate. Because remember, just because our culture is in a way where it's unlikely for us to be compassionate, it doesn't change the fact God has told us we need to have compassion and we need to reach people. So what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to say, all right, I'm going to have to purposefully do something in my life to make sure I'm not like our culture, because I still need to be effective. I still need to witness to people. I still need to have compassion. And so I would just encourage people, start watching and learning. Start watching and learning. We see, I'm not going to take time to go to the passage. In Ezekiel 33, we have the famous watchman on the wall passage, where it was his job to watch, to see dangers, and to warn the people. That was his job. He was a watchman. And we are watchmen. Okay? And we understand Jesus is coming back one of these days. Judgment is coming on the world. It is our job to warn the people. It's our job to communicate with them and to find out what we've got to do. I wish it was easy as just blowing a trumpet. We got to do a little more than that to get people's attention today. But it's our job to get their attention and to let them know what's going on. We are the watchmen of this area. We are the people that God has put in this community to warn others about judgment that's coming, but also to tell others and show others how they're supposed to live so they can have good, abundant lives. It's our job to do that kind of thing. And we've got to know our community. We've got to know the people that we're around. They often say, too, that in a lot of these difficult neighborhoods, how important it is that they need to get back to cops who just kind of have a beat that they walk, where they get to know the community and the people get to know them. They will be more effective than just kind of random people just kind of going through these areas following certain protocols. No, you got to know the people. We need to know our neighborhood, and we need to know what we're dealing with and what their hangups are. And folks, I know we're all America in these 50 states, but not every place is the same. Okay? And again, culture in Louisville, in the city, is a lot different than it is out here. Soul winning in inner city Louisville is going to be way different than soul winning in like the ritzy area. It's the same thing out here. I mean, is there not a huge difference between soul winning in rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods? It's a huge difference. I mean, we've got to do it with both, but there's definitely a difference. And so if we're going to be able to reach people, we can't just have this one-size-fits-all mentality with how we approach things, with how we present things. We've got to figure out who we're dealing with. We've got to figure out what their hang-ups are. We need to be aware of what the Catholics believe, so we know how to address things whenever we're talking to a Catholic. We need to know what the Lutherans believe and all these other groups. And whatever kind of person we come in contact with, we need to know something about them. We need to be aware of things culturally. We need to understand too, you got to have a little bit of just common sense and say, hey, we also live in a world where there are perverts out there and child molesters, and we got to be careful about how we approach houses and whenever children are around, we've got to be aware of those things, because while we would never do anything, we also understand how things can look. And so we've got to be aware of the day and age that we're living in. We've got to be aware. We can't just, as a guy, going in a house and talking to a lady and things like that. We've got to be aware of those things. And so it's about paying attention. So start watching, start listening. We've got to listen to people. Okay? Again, not because we're just respecting everybody's views. No. I want to know what the Catholics think. I want to know what the Methodists think. I want to know what they believe. I want to know how they're coming to the conclusions they're coming to. Not so I can get up in a pulpit and misrepresent them and make them look like a bunch of weirdos and scare you all from ever going that direction. No, I want to know what they actually believe, and I want to find out why they believe it so I can figure out how better to show them their error. And if I go up to a Methodist and I just start straw-manning all their beliefs, you think I'm going to win them over? They're going to think, dude, you don't know anything about the Methodists. You're a clown, I'm not going to talk to you. No, I want to know exactly what they believe, and I want to show them from the Scriptures what the truth is. But we've got to listen. We've got to be aware of their hang-ups. If we do, we will know what to do. And so, obviously, we don't have the power that Jesus has to heal, to raise the dead, but we do have the power to make the difference, but we've got to have compassion in order to know what to do. And if I have to specifically tell you what you are required to do for every situation, just understand you don't have compassion. But so, what should we do? I understand we're not supposed to lay hands on other people's kids, but if I see somebody else's kid running in the street, what's the proper protocol for that? Do I need to tell you that? If you see a kid running on a busy street, you go out there and you grab him, you pull him off the street. If I have to tell you what to do, it just shows that you have no natural affection. It shows that something's wrong. No, we'll know what to do if we see it, if we're aware of what's going on. And we still have this command to reach the world, to make a difference. And we need to be aware of our cultural challenges and the fact that certain things are not going to come as natural to us as they should. And we've got to purposefully do these things we talked about. Become people watchers. Do that practice of going to a mall and just sitting on the mourner's bench, as I like to call it, where you normally wait for your wife. But sit there with your wife or sit there with your kids and people watch. And just observe behavior and talk and even play the game too, where you're saying what they're saying or something like that. It just teaches you to be observant. Don't do it to be judgmental. Okay? Don't do it to be judgmental. But parents, it's okay for you to point these things out to your kids and say, hey, that guy out there who's walking around like a zombie and who kind of looks like a zombie, he's doing that because he's on drugs. Do you want to walk around like a zombie like that? Do you want to pass out like that? When we were in Philadelphia, Alana was with me, and we watched this guy standing on the street, just all hunched over, kind of bent in half, just acting all weird. I forgot what drug makes him do that. And I point out, you see what that guy's doing right there? That guy's on drugs right now. That's why we don't do drugs. And it was weird. It was bizarre. But you know what? That's what happens when you do those things. And many people, they're not aware. It's like they're not paying attention. And that's why, too, with all the things we've seen, too, we've got social media, we've got reels, we've seen all the videos of people doing dumb things while drunk, while on drugs. And it's just like, hey, how are you so foolish that you will mess with those things when we've got all this evidence around us that it produces no good? It makes you foolish. It makes you do dumb things. Why is that? And unfortunately, a lot of people just don't have that wisdom. But as Christians, we need to realize wisdom's crying in the streets, and we've got to listen. And we've got to have that compassion. In order to do that, you got to see it. You got to see it, so let's be observant. So with that, let's pray. Dear Lord, I pray you'll help us to take these things to heart, Lord. I pray you'll help us to be observant people. Lord, help us to not get so focused on what we're doing in our own lives and our own problems that we are just oblivious to the real struggles that are around us, Lord. There's always somebody going through more than we are, and help us to just not look every man on our own things, but every man also on the things of others. Help us to just to have that compassion that we need so we can do what's necessary to make a real difference in people's lives. In your name we pray. Amen.